scorching sun beat down on the city, turning the pavement into a shimmering illusion of heat. The streets pulsed with life. Cars honked impatiently, pedestrians rushed by, and the hum of urban chaos never ceased. But for 12-year-old Malik Carter, it was just another relentless day. He moved through the crowded sidewalks like a ghost, unnoticed and ignored, just another shadow in a world that barely acknowledged his existence. His sneakers were battered, the soles threatening to give way at any moment, and his oversized jacket flapped loosely around his frail frame as he walked. Slung over his shoulder was his ever-present backpack, filled with scraps of a life that most people would call worthless: old papers, a dull pencil, a tattered photograph. But to Malik, it was everything. He had no home, no family, no place to return to when night fell. The cold concrete was his bed, the alleyways his shelter, and the streets his reality. His mother had disappeared years ago, and as for his father, Malik had never known him, never even been sure he existed. Survival was the only lesson he had ever truly learned. He had mastered the art of staying out of sight, keeping his head down, avoiding trouble. People might glance at him with fleeting pity, but they never stopped. They never asked if he was okay. He wasn't their problem. In this city, there were only two kinds of people: the ones who had everything and the ones who had nothing. And Malik had learned painfully that the people with everything would never truly see the ones with nothing. Today was no different. He wandered the streets, stomach hollow with hunger, scanning for anything that might get him through the next few hours. A discarded sandwich from a cafe, a half-eaten bag of chips in the trash, or maybe, if luck was on his side, a kind stranger who would slip him a few coins or a hot dog. But hope was a dangerous thing, and Malik had long since stopped expecting kindness from the world. As he walked past gleaming storefronts and well-dressed people clutching their designer bags and expensive coffees, he felt the familiar sting in his chest, a deep ache of something he couldn't name. The towering buildings above him stretched toward the sky, so far out of reach they might as well have belonged to another world, a world he would never be a part of. He knew how to survive: stay invisible, keep moving, don't draw attention. Over the years, he had perfected the skill of blending into the background, of being just another part of the city that people ignored. They looked at him, then looked away, uncomfortable with the truth of his existence. He was nothing to them. The weight of the sun pressed down on his shoulders, his sweat mixing with the grime of the streets. His stomach clenched with hunger, a dull pain he had grown used to. His fingers absent-mindedly brushed against the strap of his backpack, the rough fabric grounding him. Inside, among the scraps of his life, was the one thing that still felt real: a faded photograph of his mother. He traced the edges of it, letting the worn paper cool his palm. It was the only thing left of her, the last remnant of a life that had disappeared. With a sigh, Malik lifted his gaze to the horizon. Just another endless day ahead. Another day of being invisible. Another day of simply surviving. But then something shifted. Up ahead in the shadowed mouth of an alley, something didn't belong. A woman slumped against a dumpster, her body twisted unnaturally, her breaths ragged in the suffocating heat. Even from a distance, Malik could tell something was wrong. Her clothes, expensive but disheveled, were stretched tightly over her frame as if she hadn't eaten or slept in days. But it wasn't just her condition that made Malik's stomach tighten. It was what he saw clipped to her belt: a badge. Not just any badge. FBI. His heart pounded. He had seen people in bad shape before. Drunks, addicts, the broken souls the city had swallowed whole. Some you helped, some you didn't. But this woman wasn't like the others. She wasn't lost in a haze of drugs or alcohol. She wasn't just another forgotten life on the streets. She was running from something. His eyes flickered to her waist where a gun holster rested against her side. She didn't reach for it. She was too weak, too vulnerable. Then she moved, her hand trembling with effort, pressed protectively against her stomach. And that's when Malik saw it, the slight curve beneath her blazer. A sharp pang shot through him. She was pregnant. "Help me," she rasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. Malik froze. His instincts screamed at him to walk away, to pretend he hadn't seen her, to stay out of whatever mess she was tangled in. He had spent his whole life learning not to get involved, not to draw attention, not to care about things that could drag him into danger. But something inside him refused to let him turn away. He had seen too many people ignored, too many people left to fend for themselves. And for once in his life, he had a chance to change that. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stepped forward, his legs unsteady beneath him. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her, and hesitated for just a second. Then with a deep breath, he reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm. For the first time in a long time, Malik Carter wasn't invisible, and for the first time, he was about to change someone else's story. The weight of the woman in his arms grew heavier with each passing second, but Malik refused to let go. He had made his choice. He would not abandon her. He couldn't. His legs burned, his arms ached, and his lungs begged for air. But he pushed forward, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The narrow alleyway seemed endless, stretching before him like a tunnel with no exit. Every shadow, every distant noise sent a jolt of fear through him. He didn't know who the men were, but he knew enough. They were dangerous, and they were coming. Then through the haze of panic and exhaustion, he saw it, a convenience store. The flickering neon lights buzzed in the silence of the street, casting a dim glow on the pavement. It wasn't much, but it was something, somewhere. He had nowhere else to go, no other choice but to stumble forward. His vision blurred as he reached the glass door, nearly slamming into it as he shoved his way inside. The sudden chime of the entrance bell cut through the air, startling the elderly man behind the counter. The old man's eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. A breathless, sweat-drenched boy clutching the unconscious body of a woman, her blazer stained with blood. "Call the cops," Malik gasped, his voice hoarse, desperate. "She's FBI." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The store felt too small, the walls pressing in, the fluorescent lights humming loudly in the silence. The clerk's gaze flickered between Malik and the woman, his hand hovering over the telephone. His face twisted in hesitation, uncertainty. Malik's heart pounded in his ears. "Please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. Then, as if something in the old man shifted, he reached for the phone, his fingers shaking as he punched in the numbers. Malik barely heard him speak. His own pulse roared louder than anything else. His mind raced. Had the men followed him? Were they already outside? Would they find him before help arrived? And then, sirens. The distant wail of police vehicles shattered the quiet, growing louder, faster, cutting through the night air like a blade. Malik exhaled, his body trembling as the realization hit. He had done it. Help was coming. She was going to be okay. But his relief was short-lived. The store door burst open with a force that sent the small bell clattering against the glass. Officers flooded inside, guns drawn, voices sharp and commanding. The sudden chaos swallowed him whole, and before he could react, everything changed. "Hands up! Now!" The voice was like thunder, booming and unquestionable. Malik's breath caught in his throat. He didn't move. He couldn't. His arms were still wrapped around the agent, his fingers still gripping the fabric of her jacket as if letting go would mean losing everything. "Drop her and put your hands where I can see them," another officer shouted. Malik's heart slammed against his ribs. His body refused to obey. He had done nothing wrong, nothing, but the cold weight of reality pressed against him harder than ever before. They didn't see a scared kid who had just risked everything to save someone's life. They didn't see his exhaustion, his desperation, his courage. They saw a black boy holding a white woman, a suspect, a threat. Terror clawed up his spine. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run. But where? There was nowhere left to go. His fingers trembled as he slowly, painfully loosened his grip on the woman, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. "I didn't," he started, but the words barely left his lips before an officer moved toward him. Gun still raised, his expression unreadable but filled with something Malik had seen before. Distrust. Judgment. Malik's world, the one he had fought so hard to survive in, suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. He had saved her life, but now he wasn't sure if anyone would save his. The voices of the officers rang in Malik's ears, their commands sharp and unwavering, but he could barely hear them over the pounding of his own heart. All he could see were their eyes, watching him, studying him, filled with doubt and suspicion. He wanted to speak, to force the words out, to make them understand that he was not the enemy, that he had been the one to save her, that he was not a threat. But his throat felt tight, his mouth dry, and no matter how hard he tried, the words wouldn't come. He could feel their judgment pressing down on him, like a weight he had carried all his life. And just when he thought it would crush him completely, something shifted. A woman stepped forward from the line of officers, her blonde hair pulled back, her expression not as harsh as the others. Her gaze flickered from Malik to the unconscious agent in his arms. For a moment, she just looked. Then slowly, she gave a subtle nod to the others, a silent command. One by one, their weapons lowered. A flicker of hope sparked inside Malik's chest. "Is she okay?" the woman asked, her voice quieter than the chaos around them. Malik swallowed hard, barely able to force his voice above a whisper. "She's alive. She's just unconscious. She was running from someone. I don't know who, but they were after her." The officer nodded, turning back to her team. A few murmured among themselves, still hesitant, but they obeyed her silent authority, stepping back, no longer treating him like a threat. Malik let out a shaky breath. The pressure that had wrapped around his lungs finally loosened, if only just a little. The female officer approached him, her voice softer than before. "What's your name, son?" "Malik," he said, barely above a whisper. She nodded again. "You did the right thing. You saved her life." A pause. Then gently she added, "We'll take it from here." The moment felt unreal. Malik could only watch as the officers carefully lifted the woman from his arms, moving with precision, no longer filled with aggression, but something almost like respect. He wanted to say something, to ask what would happen next, but before he could, the female officer met his gaze once more. "You should go," she said softly. "This isn't your fight anymore." Malik hesitated. Go where? He had nowhere, no one. But something in her tone told him that this wasn't a suggestion. It was a kindness, a way to let him walk away before things turned against him again. So he turned, slipping past the officers, past the old man behind the counter who had called for help, past the glass doors of the convenience store, and into the cold night. His heart still thundered in his chest, his hands still shaking, but he was free. For now. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for one fleeting moment, he had done something that mattered, and no one could take that away from him. A week later, Malik sat on the edge of his bed, staring around in disbelief. His own bed, his own room, his own space. The walls of the apartment were freshly painted, the floors clean, the air warm in a way he wasn't used to. No more cold nights curled up on the pavement. No more waking up to the sound of security guards telling him to move along. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. Outside, the city still buzzed with life. The distant hum of car engines, the muffled chatter of pedestrians, the occasional blare of sirens. But inside, it was quiet, peaceful, safe. Agent Brooks had come to see him earlier that day. She had stood in that very doorway, alive and whole, and thanked him over and over for what he had done. He hadn't known what to say. People didn't just help for free. That wasn't the world Malik had grown up in. But she had insisted. And now here he was, in a place that was his. He still didn't understand why she had cared so much, why she had gone out of her way to make sure he had a future. But sitting there, looking at the four walls of this apartment, the first real home he had, and as long as he could remember, he knew one thing. She had changed his life. Before she left, she had said something to him, words that still echoed in his mind, though he struggled to believe them. "You're a hero, Malik." A hero. The words didn't sit right in his chest. He was just a kid, just another face in the crowd, another body lost in the city. Heroes didn't come from alleyways. They didn't come from street corners. They weren't the ones running from the cold, from hunger, from the weight of a world that never seemed to notice them. Or maybe they were. Maybe the only reason no one ever saw them as heroes was because they weren't looking. Malik turned his gaze toward the small desk by the window, where a single photograph sat propped up against the wall. A picture of his mother, worn at the edges, but still clear enough to see the warmth in her eyes. She had always told him he was meant for more, that he had something inside him no one else could see. Maybe for the first time, he was starting to believe it. The city stretched out before him, endless and unknown. The future was uncertain, but for once that didn't scare him. For once, Malik didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged.